She was 6 months pregnant, serving coffee at a roadside diner, when the door swung open and he walked in. 10 years. 10 years since their eyes last met. And now here he was, Lorenzo Almeida. The man who once promised they'd be together forever. The man whose last name she carried for just 3 years before signing the divorce papers with hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. The floor seemed to disappear from beneath her feet. The tray of mugs almost slipped from her grasp. Her eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat, and for an infinite second the world stopped spinning. He saw her too, and froze mid-stride, his hand still on the half-open door, his eyes fixed on her as if he were seeing a ghost. If you've ever had to face the person who broke your heart in two, the person you swore to forget but could never quite rip out of your chest, you know what Mariana felt in that moment, because it wasn't just the reunion. It was the reunion with her pregnant, working in a place he'd never imagined finding her, living a life he could never have imagined she'd live. And what happened next changed everything, not just between them, but in everything they both believed about love, pride, and second chances. Before I continue this story, I wanted to ask you for one simple thing. If you like hearing real stories that touch the heart and make us reflect on how much life can take unexpected turns, subscribe to the channel. Every week we bring stories like this about people who went through situations that maybe you're going through right now, situations where the past comes knocking when you least expect it. Your subscription helps me continue bringing these stories, and I promise each one will be worth your time. Now let me tell you who Mariana was, how she ended up in that place, and what that reunion was going to unleash. Mariana was 32 years old, her brown hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, dark eyes that held a mix of weariness and determination, and a round belly that no longer fit under the diner's green apron. She woke up every day at 5 in the morning, showered in a tiny one-bedroom apartment in the back of an old building in Campinas, and took 2 buses to get to work by 6:30. The smell of grease and strong coffee clung to her clothes, her hair, her skin. Her hands were rough from washing dishes, her legs ached from standing all day, and her back complained about the weight of the pregnancy added to the weight of the trays she carried from table to table. But Mariana didn't complain. She had learned long ago that complaining changed nothing. The diner was located on Highway 103, a stop for truckers, sales reps, and hurried travelers. The place was simple, with worn Formica tables, cracked plastic chairs, a squeaky fan on the ceiling, and an old television hanging on the wall, always tuned to some news program. The floor was red tile, stained by years of use, and the walls had that yellowish hue that comes from time and accumulated grease. Mariana had been working there for 4 months, ever since her previous job at a packaging factory was cut due to the crisis. It was honest work, tiring, but honest. And honesty was all she had now. 10 years earlier, Mariana lived a completely different life. She was 22 when she met Lorenzo at a charity event in São Paulo. He was 28, ambitious, charming, with a smile that lit up any room and a confidence that made anyone believe he could conquer the world. And he did. Lorenzo was the son of a logistics businessman, but he didn't want to live in his father's shadow. He built a technology company focused on optimizing transportation routes from scratch, and in 5 years he turned it into an empire. When he proposed to Mariana, she could hardly believe it. He took her to dinner at a rooftop restaurant of a 5-star hotel, got down on one knee with a diamond ring that sparkled so much Mariana had to blink twice to make sure it was real. She said yes before he even finished the question. They got married 6 months later in a grand ceremony at a club in Alphaville with over 300 guests, an imported dress that cost the equivalent of a new car, and a honeymoon in Santorini that she still remembered as if it were yesterday. For the first 2 years, everything seemed like a fairy tale. They lived in a penthouse in Moema, travelled abroad 3 times a year, dined at the best restaurants, and Mariana had a life many women dreamed of. But gradually the cracks began to appear. Lorenzo worked more and more. He left home before 6 in the morning and returned after midnight. On weekends, he'd lock himself in the office to catch up on work. Mariana tried to understand, tried to be patient. She knew building an empire required sacrifices. But what she didn't know was that Lorenzo was building that empire on a foundation of lies. He hid debts. He made secret deals. He got involved with people Mariana never met and whom he never mentioned. And when it all fell apart, when the company began to sink in lawsuits and financial scandals, Lorenzo didn't turn to her for help. He turned his back. One night he came home, threw a suitcase on the floor, and said, his voice as cold as ice, that he needed space. He said the marriage was getting in the way, that he needed to focus on saving what was left of the business, that she was a distraction. Mariana stood there, frozen in the middle of the living room, unable to process what she was hearing. She asked if he still loved her. He looked at her with empty eyes and replied, "I don't know, Mariana, I really don't know." 3 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived. She signed them, not because she wanted to, but because she no longer had the strength to fight for someone who had already given up on her. The next 3 years were the hardest of Mariana's life. She left the Moema penthouse with 2 suitcases of clothes and nothing else. Lorenzo kept everything. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. He had expensive lawyers who made sure she walked away from the marriage with as little as possible. Mariana tried to fight, but her parents were retired with modest incomes, and she had no money to fund a legal battle. So she accepted. She moved back into her parents' house in Campinas, slept in the bedroom she had as a teenager, and started rebuilding her life from scratch. She'd worked as a receptionist, then a sales associate in a clothing store, then in a factory. She met people, she dated, she tried to move on, and eventually she met Andre, a 35-year-old mechanic, divorced, with a 7-year-old daughter. Andre was kind, hard-working, simple. Nothing like the sparkle Lorenzo had, but Mariana didn't want sparkle anymore. She wanted peace, and Andre gave her that. They dated for 1.5 years. He talked about marriage, about building a family, about giving Mariana the stability she deserved. And then Mariana got pregnant. It was a surprise, but a happy surprise. She told Andre with a smile on her face, hoping he'd be happy too. But he wasn't. Andre panicked, said he wasn't ready, that he was still paying child support for his daughter, that he could barely make ends meet. He asked her to think about it. And when Mariana said she wanted to have the baby, that she'd figure it out, Andre disappeared. He blocked her number, changed his garage, vanished as if he'd never existed. And Mariana was alone. Again. Now 6 months pregnant, working at a roadside diner, Mariana had learned not to expect anything from anyone. She was going to have that baby alone. She was going to raise that child alone. And she was going to survive because that's what she knew how to do, survive. But she didn't expect that on Tuesday, March 12th, at 3 in the afternoon, Lorenzo Almeida would walk through the door of that diner and her life would be turned upside down again. He looked different, thinner, with a few grey hairs at his temples, deep circles under his eyes, and an expression Mariana couldn't decipher. He wore a slightly rumpled white dress shirt, jeans and dress shoes covered in dust. He didn't look like the billionaire she'd known. He looked tired, human, vulnerable. He stopped there, in the middle of the diner, looking at her as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. And Mariana, her tray still in her trembling hands, looked back, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would jump out of her mouth. The baby kicked inside her belly, as if sensing its mother's emotional storm. And then Lorenzo took a step forward, and another, until he was a few feet away from her. His lips parted, but no words came out. Mariana took a deep breath, forced her legs to move, and murmured in a weak voice, "Can I take your order?" Lorenzo blinked, as if just waking from a trance. He looked around, saw that other people in the diner were starting to stare, and then looked back at her. "Mariana," he said, his voice rough, heavy with something she couldn't name. Shock? Regret? Pain? She didn't know. "I need to talk to you," he continued, taking another step. Mariana instinctively recoiled, holding the tray as if it were a shield. "There's nothing to talk about," she replied, her voice firmer than she expected. "I'm working. If you want to eat something, have a seat over there, and I'll take your order." Lorenzo ran a hand over his face, visibly shaken. "Mariana, please, I know you don't owe me anything, but please, give me 5 minutes, just 5 minutes." Mariana felt her throat tighten. 10 years since he'd shattered her heart and moved on without a backward glance. And now he shows up out of nowhere, asking for 5 minutes? She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw that tray on the floor, turn her back, and walk out. But something in his expression, something in the way his shoulders were slumped, as if he carried the weight of the world, made her hesitate. "5 minutes?" she finally said, her voice low. "During my break. In an hour. Wait outside." Lorenzo nodded, relieved, and left the diner without ordering anything. Mariana went back to the kitchen on wobbly legs, placed the tray on the counter, and rested her hands on the edge, taking deep breaths, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions exploding inside her. Her boss, Mr. Adamir, a 60-year-old man with a grey mustache and a prominent belly, appeared beside her. "You know that guy?" he asked, curious. Mariana hesitated, then nodded. "I used to, a long time ago." Adamir studied her face for a moment, then shrugged. "Be careful, girl. A man who shows up from the past never brings anything good." Mariana didn't answer, because deep down she knew he was right. An hour later, Mariana walked out the back door of the diner, still wearing her green apron, and found Lorenzo leaning against his car, a beat-up silver sedan that was definitely not the kind of car he used to drive. He looked up when he saw her, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then Lorenzo broke the silence. "You're pregnant," he stated, not a question. Mariana crossed her arms protectively over her chest. "I am." He swallowed hard. "Whose is it?" Mariana felt anger surge like lava. "That's none of your business, Lorenzo." He closed his eyes as if he'd been slapped. "You're right. I'm sorry. I have no right to ask anything." Silence. The wind from the highway blew between them, kicking up dust and dry leaves. Mariana waited. Lorenzo took a deep breath. "I know you don't want to hear me. I know I was the worst thing that ever happened in your life. But I need you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry, for what I did, for what I put you through. You didn't deserve any of it." Mariana felt her eyes sting, but she blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of him. "Why are you here, Lorenzo? Why now? 10 years? 10 years, and you never sent a text, never called, never asked if I was alive, and now you show up out of nowhere wanting to apologize. What do you want from me?" Lorenzo looked at the ground. When he looked up again, his eyes were red. "I broke, Mariana. The company went under for good. I lost everything, the house, the cars, the bank account, everything. I'm living in a rented room and driving this car borrowed from a friend. And you know what's worse? I deserved it. I deserved all of it because I destroyed the only good thing I had in my life. You. The words fell like bombs between them. Mariana felt her chest tighten, but she said nothing. Lorenzo continued, his voice breaking. I was coming back from Sao Paulo from a meeting that went nowhere when I stopped here for a coffee. I didn't know you worked here. I swear I didn't. But when I saw you standing there, pregnant, working in that place, I felt the ground open up beneath me because I remembered who you were when we were together. I remembered the incredible woman you are. And I saw what I did to your life. Mariana let out a bitter laugh. You didn't do anything to my life, Lorenzo. You left it. And I rebuilt it alone. This belly, it's mine. This job, it's mine. This life, it's mine. You have nothing to do with it. Lorenzo nodded, tears finally streaming down his face. I know. And I'm not here asking to get back together. I don't even deserve to be near you. I just wanted you to know I'm truly sorry. And if you need anything at all, I'll be here. I know I don't have money. I know I have nothing else to offer you. But if you need help, please, let me help. Mariana stared at him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to accept. Part of her wanted to scream that yes, she needed help, that she was terrified of having a baby alone, that she could barely afford rent, that she woke up in the middle of the night, scared of the future. But the stronger part of her, the part that had survived the divorce, the loneliness, Andre's abandonment, that part said no. I don't need your help, Lorenzo. I'll be okay. I always am. And then she turned her back and went back into the diner, leaving him there, alone in the parking lot, heartbroken. In the following days, Lorenzo returned. Every afternoon he'd show up at the diner, order a coffee and a donut, sit at a corner table, and just stay there, in silence, watching Mariana work. He never approached her, never tried to talk. He was just there. And Mariana pretended he didn't exist. But she felt it. She felt the weight of his gaze. She felt the weight of his presence. And she felt something inside her that she desperately tried to smother. Something that felt dangerously like longing. 2 weeks later, on a Friday afternoon, Mariana was wiping down a table when she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She stopped, her hand flying to her stomach, her face paling. The pain passed, but returned a few seconds later, stronger. She let out a low groan, and Donna Celia, the cook, rushed over. "Mariana, what is it?" the woman asked, alarmed. Mariana tried to breathe, but the pain gripped her like a vice. "I don't know, And then she looked down and saw it. Blood, running down her legs, staining the floor. Her heart leaped. No, 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 no. "My baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My baby." Donna Celia yelled for someone to call an ambulance. The people in the diner started to stir, confused, scared. And then Lorenzo, who was sitting in the corner booth as usual, jumped up and rushed over to her. He held her by the shoulders, his eyes wide. "Mariana, look at me. Look at me. You're going to be okay. I'm taking you to the hospital right now." Mariana could barely think straight. The pain, the fear, the blood, it all swirled into a terrifying mess. Lorenzo scooped her into his arms carefully, as if she were made of glass, and ran to his car. If this story is hitting you, imagine what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories like this. Here we tell real stories of people who faced the impossible, and I'm sure many of them will make you feel less alone on this journey. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where you felt the ground disappear from under your feet? Have you had that moment when the person you trusted most let you down in a way you never imagined? Write I've been there below if this story touched you in any way. Your comment might be exactly the message someone else needed to read today to know they're not alone. Lorenzo drove like a madman through the streets of Chicago, running yellow lights, speeding through turns, with Mariana in the back seat, groaning in pain and clutching her stomach with both hands. He called the hospital on his cell, yelling that he was bringing in a bleeding pregnant woman, that they needed to prep everything. When they arrived at the emergency room, doctors and nurses were already waiting. They put Mariana on a gurney and rushed her inside. Lorenzo tried to follow, but a nurse blocked his path. "Sir, are you the father?" she asked. Lorenzo hesitated. He could lie, he could say yes, but he couldn't. "No, I was her husband, a long time ago." The nurse nodded. "Then you'll have to wait out here." And the door closed in his face. Lorenzo stood there, frozen in the cold, white hospital corridor, his hands still stained with blood, his heart pounding, and a sense of helplessness so immense he could barely breathe. He sat down in a plastic chair, buried his face in his hands, and for the first time in years, he prayed. He prayed that Mariana would be okay. He prayed that the baby would survive. He prayed for a chance to fix even a fraction of the damage he had caused. 3 hours passed, 3 eternal hours of silence broken only by the sound of hurried footsteps, gurneys being pushed, phones ringing. Lorenzo didn't leave. He didn't eat. He didn't drink water. He didn't answer the calls on his cell. He just waited. And then finally a doctor emerged. Lorenzo jumped to his feet. "How is she?" he asked, desperate. The doctor, a man in his 50s with glasses and an impeccable lab coat, looked at him with a serious expression. "The patient is stable. It was a placental abruption. We managed to control the bleeding, but she'll need complete bed rest until the end of her pregnancy. Any exertion could trigger premature labor or serious complications." Lorenzo felt his legs go weak with relief. "And the baby?" The doctor gave a small smile. "The baby is doing well, for now. But Mrs. Mariana will need a lot of care and constant monitoring." Lorenzo nodded frantically. "I'll take care of her, I promise. Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "Room 302, but only for a few minutes. She needs to rest." Lorenzo ran up the stairs, his heart hammering in his chest, and stopped at the door of room 302. He took a deep breath. He knocked lightly. Mariana's weak voice came from inside. "Come in." He opened the door slowly. Mariana was lying in bed, as pale as a sheet, hooked up to monitors that beeped softly, an oxygen mask hanging beside the bed. She turned her head when she saw him, and her eyes filled with tears. Lorenzo crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt beside the bed, holding her hand with both of his. "You're okay," he said, his voice thick. "You're okay. Thank God you're okay." Mariana closed her eyes, tears streaming down her temples. "My baby," she whispered. "Is my baby okay?" Lorenzo squeezed her hand. "He is. The doctor said he's fine. But you need rest. A lot of rest." Mariana sobbed. "I can't. I have to work. I have to pay rent. I have to—" Lorenzo interrupted her, his voice firm. "No, you're not working. You're going to rest, and I'll take care of you." Mariana opened her eyes, confused. "Lorenzo, you can't." "I can," he replied, "and I will. I know you don't owe me anything. I know I don't even deserve to be here. But Mariana, please, let me do this. Let me fix at least one thing, please." Mariana looked at him for a long moment. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to say she didn't need him, that she'd figure it out on her own. But the truth was, she was scared, terrified, and for the first time in years, someone was offering help. Someone who, despite everything, still meant something to her. She closed her eyes again and murmured, "Okay." Lorenzo let out the breath he'd been holding. Thank you, Mariana." And that night, he slept in a chair beside her bed, refusing to leave, refusing to let her be alone. When Mariana woke up in the early morning, jolted by a nightmare, and saw him there, sleeping uncomfortably in the chair with his neck twisted and his face weary, something inside her broke, and for the first time in 10 years, she let the tears fall freely without trying to hold them back. In the following days, Lorenzo transformed Mariana's life. He took her from the hospital to her apartment, and when he saw where she lived, the tiny place, the peeling walls, the old mattress on the floor, the fridge that barely worked, he said nothing. He just came back a few hours later with new sheets, pillows, food, water, medicine. He cleaned the apartment from top to bottom. He fixed the dripping faucet. He replaced the burnt-out light bulbs. And every morning he showed up with a fresh breakfast and asked how she'd slept. Mariana didn't know how to process it. The man who had abandoned her, the man she swore to hate forever, was there, taking care of her with a dedication she'd never seen in him before. One afternoon, while he was making soup in the kitchen, Mariana finally asked, "Why are you doing this, Lorenzo? Why are you here?" He stopped stirring the pot and turned to her. "Because I love you, Mariana. I always have. And I was the biggest idiot in the world for not realizing it when I still had you." Mariana felt her heart race. "You love me?" Lorenzo nodded, his eyes filled with pain and regret. "I do, and I know it's too late. I know you'll never forgive me. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I'll be here, for you and for your baby, because you deserve someone to look after you. And if you let me, I want to be that person." Mariana didn't answer, because she didn't know what to say. But that night, as Lorenzo was leaving the apartment, she called out to him. "Lorenzo?" He stopped at the door and looked back. "Stay," she said softly. "Just tonight. Stay here tonight." Lorenzo blinked, surprised, then nodded. He slept on the tiny sofa in the living room, covered with a thin blanket. And Mariana, lying in bed a few feet away, felt for the first time in months that she wasn't completely alone. Weeks passed. Lorenzo kept showing up. He got a temporary job with a delivery company, working nights, so he could be with Mariana during the day. He took her to doctor's appointments, held her hand during ultrasounds, listened to the baby's heartbeat, and smiled like it was the most beautiful thing in the world. And little by little, Mariana felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. She tried to resist. She tried to remember the pain, the betrayal, everything he had done. But it was hard. Because the man by her side now wasn't the same man who had asked for a divorce 10 years ago. This man was humble. This man was present. This man looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the universe. And Mariana, despite all her fear, began to fall in love again. One night, 2 months after the scare at the hospital, Mariana was sitting on the sofa reading a book when she felt the baby kick hard. She let out a laugh and put her hand on her belly. Lorenzo, who was washing dishes, turned around. "What is it?" She kicked hard. Lorenzo dried his hands quickly and came over to the sofa. "Can I feel?" Mariana hesitated, then nodded. Lorenzo placed his hand on her belly, gently, and waited. A few seconds later, the baby kicked again. His eyes widened. "She's strong." Mariana smiled. "She is." Lorenzo looked at her, his eyes shining with emotion. "Mariana, I know I have no right to ask this, but have you thought about a name?" Mariana looked at him. "I have. Sophia." Lorenzo repeated the name softly. "Sophia. It's beautiful." They stayed there in silence, his hand still on her belly, feeling the life pulsing inside. And then Lorenzo said, his voice trembling, I wish I could have been her father. I wish I could say she's my daughter, but I know I can't. Mariana felt her eyes sting. Lorenzo. He shook his head. No, let me speak. I know I messed everything up between us. And I know this baby isn't mine, but Mariana, if you let me, I will love this child as if she were my own. I will be the best stepfather she could have. I will be there for both of you, always, if you let me. Mariana looked deep into his eyes, and then, for the first time in 10 years, she let her heart speak louder than her head. Okay. Lorenzo blinked. Okay. She nodded, the tears finally falling. Okay, you can stay. You can be part of our life. But Lorenzo, if you hurt me again... He interrupted her, cupping her face with both hands. I won't. I swear on everything I won't. You are the woman of my life, Mariana, and I will spend the rest of my days proving it to you. And then he kissed her. Slowly, gently, full of love and regret and hope. And Mariana kissed him back, allowing herself, finally, to believe that maybe, just maybe, people could really change. 3 months later, on an August morning, Mariana went into labor. Lorenzo rushed her to the hospital, holding her hand the entire way, whispering that everything was okay, that she was strong, that he was there. The labor was long and difficult, but when they finally heard the baby's cry, when the nurse placed Sophia in Mariana's arms, the world stopped. Lorenzo was by the bedside, looking at the little girl with tears in his eyes. She's perfect, he whispered. Mariana smiled, exhausted but happy. She is. Lorenzo looked at her. Can I hold her? Mariana hesitated for just a second, then passed the baby to him. Lorenzo held her with absurd care, as if she were made of crystal. And when Sophia opened her tiny eyes and looked at him, something inside Lorenzo transformed forever. Hi, Sophia, he murmured. I'm Lorenzo, and I'm going to take care of you and your mom for the rest of my life, I promise. And in that moment, Mariana knew. She knew that despite everything, despite the pain, despite the past, they were going to be okay. Because true love, the kind that weathers storms, makes mistakes and heals hurts, that kind of love always finds a way back. Always. If this story touched your heart in any way, I'm asking you from the bottom of my heart, subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't just tell stories. We create a space where real people share real pain and find comfort in knowing they're not alone. Every subscription helps me continue this work, and I promise that every week you'll find a story here that will make you reflect, cry, smile, and above all, feel understood. And before you go, do me a favor. Write in the comments one word, just one, that sums up how you felt listening to this story. It could be hope, it could be strength, it could be pain. It doesn't matter what it is, because every comment down below becomes a chain of support for someone who might be going through the toughest time of their life and needs to know that people care. Write, this story moved me, if you felt something. Thank you so much for sticking with me this far. It means more than you can imagine. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and I'll see you in the next story. I'll be waiting here for you.